This is Performance Delivered, Insider Secrets for Digital Marketing Success with Steffen Horst.
In today's episode, we're going to talk about marketing performance assessments. Here to speak with me is Grant Johnson, CMO at Chief Outsider, the nation's leading executive as a service firm, which helps CEOs and their organizations identify the fractional marketing and sales executives they need to accelerate growth. Grant works with CEOs at mid-market B2B SaaS companies to double revenue, scale operations, and drive market leadership, building profitable global businesses. As a result-driven 6-time CMO with a proven track record growing revenue by 10 times and 7 successful exits, he serves on an executive team, drives transformational change, delivers constant growth, and facilitates billion-dollar liquidity events. Grant is a trusted leader with exceptional interpersonal and communication skills. He builds, mentors, and retains high-performance teams that exceed corporate goals. Grant, welcome to the show.
Steffen, it's great to be here, and thanks for that kind introduction.
Well, before we start talking about marketing performance assessments, tell our listeners more about yourself. How did you get started in your career, and what led you to where you're currently at?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating journey in marketing. Like a lot of folks, I had worked in different areas. I was fortunate after getting my degree to be in a rotational assignment, in operations and manufacturing and finance. And then I got into the sales and marketing. We were going to a trade show and we were doing these ads. I said, man, that's where the action is. I like the dynamic nature of marketing. And then I got into tech marketing and eventually last 10 years plus specialized in SaaS, software as a service. I think more and more companies are really innovating in that area. And then with GenAI, I now can say for 20 years in a row, it's the best time to be in marketing because, the internet came along and that was great. And then mobility and, now GenAI. And if you like learning new things and continually adapting and improving outcomes, and you're willing to, be performance driven and results focused, then you can really have a lot of fun and make a big impact as a marketer.
Yeah. And I think with what you just said about continuous learning, adopting new solutions that are out there, that's kind of underpins what we're talking about marketing performance assessments, right? Because if you are kind of stuck in, 2005 and what was working then, you're probably not on the pulse, basically. So tell our listeners, what led you to create the marketing performance assessment or a marketing performance assessment to help you identify how companies basically are doing?
Yeah, like a lot of things, solutions are the genesis of a problem not yet solved. And I know a lot of CMOs, probably a few hundred. I've been a 6-time, CMO and going back for, 15 plus years. And as I was in regular meetings, we call them CMO huddles, peer groups, there was a lot of discussion about, frustration over the increasing expectations and the reduced budgets to reach those unrealistic expectations. Like, how do I prove the effectiveness of marketing? How do I have to stop having to justify every dollar I spend? And so, I talked to some peers, and I had been performance-driven, results-oriented marketer. I just like to be able to demonstrate to CFOs in a language they understand, numbers, equations, formulas, models, that we're actually moving the needle. And here's why. It's not my opinion, it's the data. And so I started thinking about what really can you measure? And of course, I work a lot of PEs, a lot of them just want pipeline. But if you don't build your market presence, the first component of the marketing performance assessment, which is really your website, your social media engagement, the channels, direct or indirect. If you don't build your brand strength, which is how much people care about your communications, do they open them? Do they respond? So your engagement and your loyalty, do you retain customers? Then your pipeline creation and conversion, sort of the really where the rubber meets the road and whatever possibility becomes reality, somebody signs like a dotted line. You're going to work a lot harder to close pipeline, to make pipeline efficient. So that's why I created the 3 major areas. And I made it real simple. There's 24 metrics. You can do it with fewer metrics. There's 8 for market presence, 8 for brand strength, 8 for pipeline health. And I've done it sometimes. I said, let's figure out the 5 that matters. Because the key thing is, Steffen, is what are you going to be measured on? Get agreement on that. How do you prove contribution? How do you prove value? And then, sometimes you'll fall short, sometimes you'll exceed. But if you get those agreed on, what you don't want is every month or every board meeting, they have a different set of measures because you're going to be whipsawed left and right. So I found this really resonated. I launched last July, and I've done a number of these assessments. They're free. It's really a quick way to diagnose your current state, and you set the baseline and you set targets to continually improve.
Yeah. So you talked about measurement, obviously, and then before we came on, you and I had a chat about how shocking it is that so many companies, when you start talking to them, and it's for us as an agency the same, right? And ask them, what does success look like? Quite often you don't get an answer because they don't have defined KPIs. And then the question comes, how do you decide how much money to invest into your marketing activities? From your perspective, why do you think so many companies are struggling with defining KPIs?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I think, the PE base and VC base, and there's certainly a number of companies, they've got their portfolios. And so they sort of had a set of metrics. They may foist those upon you, and you have to negotiate what's realistic. Marketing's not a gumball machine. You just, can't wave a magic wand and suddenly pipeline appears and it materializes and it gets converted. I think they struggle because there's a fundamental lack of understanding in B2B, the buyer journey and the nonlinear nature of it, the self-driven nature of deciding whether you want to interact with you're in the market now. And so they think like, well, there's got to be some way to just do this because you're a marketer, you're creative, and you've got a budget. Just, apply dollars and rain leads. And so I think, it takes a while. A parallel thing, Steffen, to this is I sort of feel like having worked for a number of CEOs, you don't want to be the first marketer they hire because they don't really know what they're looking for a lot of times until they see what good looks like. Somebody told them this happened somewhere else, and therefore, why can't you do it? So I think that's it. But I do have, by the time this podcast is live, I will have published a new blog really getting into 3 major studies that are out there, and anybody can access. They're free. And so benchmark.ai, benchmarker, and of course, especially for SaaS companies, the periodic table from Insight Partners. Just look at those metrics, and they can have averages. It's like if you can be above those average based on 1,000 companies, that's statistically significant. So not to say it's easy, to your question, to get them to agree on metrics, but that's really the goal, is to say, hey, this is how I should be measured with my resources and budgets and the markets that I'm in. Here's what consistent good performance is. Let's aim for above that. Let's not just set a number that you pulled out of the air.
When you look through these KPIs, Grant, are you adjusting these based on the funnel activity? So, when you have upper funnel activities, which is more kind of building an audience, and compared to lower funnel activity when it's about, let's get someone to agree on a demo, for example. How do you navigate that? Because again, in my experience talking to B2B marketing leaders, they look at everything the same without really differentiating that probably on the upper funnel, it's a lot more work to get someone interested and leading them down to a point where they say, hey, okay, I want to have a demo.
Steffen, that's a really good question. And you're right. A lot of people, they just sort of homogenize, the funnel, and like all things created equal. And in the marketing performance assessment, I have 24 metrics. And I talked to people, why don't you have these 5? Why don't you have CAC? Why don't you have LTV? Why don't you have, active user minutes to show their engagement? You can add anything you want as long as you're consistently tracking over time, because you have to see, there's probably no independent variables other than spending more money, but you can see what the impact of doing one thing or another thing, or more of something and less of something. So I think, but yeah, it is important to pay attention. I often work very closely with go-to-market teams. So, a lot of marketers report to the CEO, some report to the CRO, but the go-to-market team should be one team, whether it's an SDR, BDR, marketing and sales, net new logo objectives, existing customer objectives. And you're going to have in segments, you're going to have different velocities, different values, different volumes of the pipeline. And you can't, one of the ills that I uncovered at one of my companies was the salespeople were equally compensated for expanding and for getting new logos. It's much harder to get new logos. And if you could make your number just calling on existing customers, why would you cold call? Why would you go to and prospect? But you have to get, as you said, Steffen, you've got to get the top of funnel working. And you've got to get the sales cycle working, because what I found is, let's say I create pipeline in the second half of this year for a mid-market to enterprise. That's not going to mature probably until late in the year or early the following year. But you've got to do those things now to pay off down the road. So you just got to make sure that's part of the why marketing is always balances strategic, help with the quarterly imperatives that deliver value in the quarter, right? And so that's part of the sort of the funnel equation.
Yeah. You mentioned that this assessment that you do, you kind of air quotes give it away. How long does it take you to do that marketing assessment? And what does it tell you? What specific insights do you get from it that you then share with leadership at the respective company?
Yeah, that's another illuminating question, because when I first started doing this, I wasn't sure. This goes back almost a year ago. Would it produce consistent results? And it turns out, having done dozens of these for companies from 10 million to hundreds of million, that because it's based on industry benchmarks and it's based on these best practices standards for all the metrics for market presence, brand strength, and pipeline health, it's very predictive. It's very indicative of the current state. And in one of the blogs, and I'm going to do more in the future, I said, if your score is this, if you're in the yellow zone, red is below 60. It's like a grade system, A, B, C, D. If you're below 60, you're underperforming. If you're 60 to 89, you're good performance. If you're 90 plus, you get an A, you're green. Everybody I've done is in the yellow, right? They may be low 60s or high 80s, but they're sort of in that cluster, in that range. And there's always something you can improve. And then I've created actually 18 improvement and it's publicly available. I give it away because like where Chief Outsiders comes in, where I come in, is somebody needs to help you actually figure out what to do and how to do it and how to do it better, or with an agency partner like yourself, Steffen. And because strategy is good, but execution is everything. And if you can execute better than your competitor, they could even have a better strategy. But you just, you iterate it every week. You brainstorm with the team. You put more effort into what was working. You stop doing things that weren't, all sort of the pragmatic things. But yeah, it only takes about an hour. Literally, I say it takes 30 minutes. Let's agree on the metrics. Here's my 24. You want to substitute. You want to wait, so double count. Gather those metrics. We get together. I drop them into a Google sheet. And I built the formula. It's simple. Calculates it. Here's your score. Anything that's yellow or red, and very few people are in the red, honestly. That's more like a company that's probably broken, but most are in the yellow zone. Here, let's pick off the easier things, like, things you can do within the next 30, 60, 90 days. Longer term things. If you want to change your ICP or your whole go-to-market strategy, you're not going to do that in 30 days.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, what have you found to be the key performance indicators for marketing effectiveness?
The key performance indicator?
Yeah.
First of all, there's over 100 of us in Chief Outsiders, and we have a Slack channel. So you did know, you brought up a really interesting point. Someone has a client that says they want to know what's the one metric to judge market effectiveness. I said, run, run for the hills. There's no one metric. It's more of it depends on your business. Maybe there could be 5 metrics. And then the benchmark said they talk about, what metrics are measured, right? And so some of the things, like certainly your efficiency of creating pipeline. But if they don't qualify, convert, and close at a sales that's equal to or better than your hypothesis, your assumption, that's probably not good. But that is a key one. Your efficiency of your various channels. There's a lot of digital channels out there, but not all are created equal, or they stay equal. That's key. And what I think is underrated is you can measure all you want on the metrics. You still got to make sure, that's why we're all in marketing, that you have impactful creative, because there's such a sea of sameness out there. And there's so much derivative marketing to be edgy and to be a disruptor, a challenger brand, if you will, you have to be something different. So you have to really make sure your positioning, your messaging, differentiation are clear. Then your marketing tactics will just work a lot better.
So what I'm hearing is there's no one KPI to use. Am I right or wrong if I say we probably also have to look at marketing KPIs based on funnel positions, for example, and then, if we go into the sales side, you talked about, pipeline and then converting, etc. Is that about right to say?
I mean, I think you pick off a few. I did one recent blog. I said, look, if you want to pick out 6, and there's 6, and certainly you have to have reach, and you've got to have really good engagement. You have to have creating as you said, Steph, the top of funnel, and it's got to be a ratio of 1 to 4 accepted by sales. I mean, if you're creating 100 leads and only one gets through, you probably don't have enough budget, right? But sales, one of the things I found in marketing, you want to partner with sales and make sure that they're working their efficiency metrics as much as market is. So time to process a lead, what are their SLAs, right? Because old pipeline has become stale pipeline. And what's the cycle from stage to stage, from qualification to vendor of choice to close? And what are you growing average deal size? Because if they're not improving their efficiency, you're going to sort of slow marketing down. But I'd say you could probably pick out, I have 24, but somewhere between 5 and 10 are, for any company, going to be the key metrics that will determine whether you're gaining momentum or losing share.
How would you answer the question if someone said, well, I mean, one makes a lot of sense because I can focus on one and drive my activities towards that. But if you tell me I should have 6, 24, or how many you suggest potentially, how do you define which of these KPIs are more important than the others? Because they cannot probably have all the same the same importance, basically.
I think that is, again, going to be part of the consensus building, whether it's the CRO, and the CEO, plus the board, plus investors, determine what are we looking for? Every company has their own dashboards. There's, SaaS KPIs out there. Maxio is a company that's got really good ability to help you maximize your revenue. And there's other sets of KPIs. And so, for marketing, clearly the amount of either pipeline that's created or pipeline that's influenced, that's a key one. Dollars of pipeline you create per dollar invested, I've had as high as 18 to 1, somewhere between 5 and 15 is probably more typical. And then the efficiency of your channels. And I think also you need a multiplicity of channels because buyers go to a variety of sources at different stages in their journey. And I will tell you that one of my companies recently, we were able to tag the original lead source, and content marketing actually contributed 15% of closed won revenue. And it was, as I've told this to people, I've never seen anybody get over 10. Well, it took us a year, and you'd have to see all the content we created, persona-based problem, what's the problem we're solving, jobs to be done, broken business processes to solve. And so it took about a year constructing, testing, learning, iterating. But I think that's another key one. Somebody once said to me, well, just keep doing those webinars. They're inexpensive. Well, you can't schedule a webinar 5 days a week. Maybe Salesforce can, but most companies don't have the resource. And you certainly can't buy analysts or get customers to come on and tell your story for you, problem, solution, and outcome, right, for their business. But so that's why you need to do, look, even email nurturing still works. I know people say, well, email is dead. But, if you have valuable content, your customers will read it, and maybe they'll click on, hey, this new offering would really help my business. Let's talk more about it. So I think it's those measures are pretty key.
Yeah. I mean, what you just said, I think it depends on the company and their target audience, right? And I don't think there's one solution that fits all. You got to look at, what's your target audience? Where can you engage with them successfully? And then again, where can we engage with upper funnel, mid funnel, and lower funnel, and then get them to a point where they start talking to us and we can tell them about, our company, basically.
Yeah. And like people have ROI calculator. Well, I don't want to see an ROI calculator unless I'm actually comparing your solution. That's going to be lower funnel, right? Or case studies like, you might have logos on the website. And then when you actually think customer thinks this is my solution, well, let's see, is this really like me? Is this in my industry vertical? Did they have a similar problem? Did they get similar results? And that way, you have the relevant content and tools at the right stage, as you say, Steffen, top, middle, or bottom of funnel.
Yeah. Now, what advice would you give to a marketer on how to get started if they just want to sit down and say, okay, are we doing things right? What are we missing?
Yeah, what I say is, start with what are the things that you can measure today. And you certainly have to have, whether, you're using Salesforce, some other CRM platform, Microsoft Dynamics, and there are others out there. You could be using HubSpot or Marketo or something. And, you've got some, web platform. Is what are the metrics you can gather in an automated fashion? Nobody wants to manually have to, create these spreadsheets, right? So what are the metrics you have? What are the ones that you can influence with the people, the resources, the budget that you have? And what's important, get agreement on what are we trying to improve? What are we trying to contribute? Is marketing, pipeline, new customer acquisition, efficiency of add-on sales, cross-sell expansion, if you will. And, get that agreement and then start attacking those particular metrics with, programs and tactics and measuring, what impact you're having over time.
That makes sense. Before we jumped on, you talked about GenAI briefly. What is your view on the near and long-term impact of GenAI as it relates to marketing, assessing what a company is doing currently, and then kind of the insights that you might be able to get out of that?
Well, I think the only certainty, it's guaranteed to become more impactful only over time. I've watched it, marketers first starting, using these tools and, sharing their learning a couple of years ago to where we are today, and people building their digital twins and getting entire jobs replaced by some platform. It'll make us more efficient, and I think the other keyword is effective. If you can only take efficiency, you can't. You've heard the phrase. You can't keep getting infinite returns by cutting. You have to invest your way to growth, and just the same thing is. I said to my whole team at prior company and companies to consult with is everybody should learn some tool to help them automate the mundane, repetitive tasks. But the strategic work, the creative work, the judgment, I know agentic AI is becoming big as well, and you can make better decisions faster. But that part, humans are uniquely suited to do it. I don't know, maybe over a decade from now that won't be true. But I think over the next couple of years, use the tools, learn from them, have them incorporate it into your workflow, and then free up some time to, take more risk, do more experimentation, improve other things that you can try, A/B test and what have you. But I think it's a bright future for a lot of people. There's, fear about job replacement. I just think there's new jobs, right? You can become a prompt engineer just even without programming language, as long as you can figure out how to talk to, AI.
Yeah. That actually leads me to another question. How do you deal with clients that say, hey, so you're using AI to make things easier for you, so you probably don't have to charge us so much. How do you respond to a question like that or to a statement like that?
Well, I just look, everything has to be managed. They don't run, these tools don't run by themselves. Every year, digress this for a minute and come back to the answer, but this is a standard practice for CMO heads of marketing is you should look at your tech stack. You can't just be additive. You got to take something out because it takes people to run these things. So I don't think, your cost should, your labor costs are rising around the globe, and it's the value you create. And if you can, show that, the value you create improves their business outcomes, their business results, and it's got an ROI, they spend $1,000 and improves it by 2,000 or 3,000, then why are we arguing over your hourly rate? That's my answer.
Yeah. Now, before we come to an end today, what are your go-to tactics, activity in order to generate rapid performance improvements? Are there 2-3 things where like, I quite often use those if I need to show quick results?
Yeah, I think probably 2 things. The first is just do a really fast audit, which I've done for many clients of, what are the tools you're using, technology you're investing in, how are you allocating your marketing mix, how are you allocating your budget? I'll give you an example. If, you get 30% from small business and, 20% for mid-market and 50% for enterprise, you're spending 50% of your budget on small business, Why are you doing that? You want to allocate? So, budget allocation. And then, of course, digital. A lot of agencies can help you, internal experts. You've got a digital marketer on staff, performance marketers, performance optimization. So you take a look at, what are the digital tactics? And what I often find for a lot of companies is they become overly reliant on what's worked. That's why I try to, carve out 10% of the budget for experimentation, because you may uncover something that has a 10x return. Obviously video, I think, is, short, consumable content, snackable content, another term used, that engages, video, especially. So I think YouTube's going to continue to grow in the business environment. And just, find a website, like websites, another one. Like you go to some people's homepage, you don't know what they do, let alone do they have good CRO. What's the image? What's the call to action? What's the next step? You look at all the pages that you send people to. Are they clear on the value prop and the reasons why? And so I think the audit, the marketing performance assessment and the general marketing audit, what are your deliverables? What are your capabilities? And what are your gaps? You can uncover things you can do in 90 days. All of us who have started, and I've got templates, we all have templates, the first 90 days. So there's just things you go through. And I think you generally can uncover things that you could impact in quarter. Some things will take, quarters to, improve. But I think that's what you do. You go in, you find those things. A lot of them happen to be digital. But it could be like somebody's going to events and you just ask them a simple question like, why are we spending $20,000 on this event to get $10,000 in revenue? Let's stop doing these events. There's no ROI.
Well, Grant, thank you so much for joining me on the Performance Alert podcast and sharing your knowledge about marketing performance assessments. If people want to find out more about you, about Chief Outsider, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, there's a few easy ways. I'm G Johnson at chiefoutsiders.com. I also have a site, cmomentor.com. I put blogs, best practices for marketing leaders, lessons learned, from battles in the field. But either of those ways, you can find me.
Perfect. And as always, we'll leave that information in the show notes. Thanks everyone for listening. If you like the Performance Alert podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast application. If you want to find more about Symphonic Digital, you can visit us at symphonicdigital.com or follow us on X at Symphonic HQ. Thanks again and see you next time.
Performance Delivered is sponsored by Symphonic Digital. Discover audience-focused and data-driven digital marketing solutions for small and medium businesses at symphonicdigital.com.